you ever wish you felt more confident making money decisions as a woman?
As soon as they take that leap of faith, they have this aha moment. They realize actually there is an opportunity. What is perceived to be a vulnerability can turn into a very robust long-term strategy to create and maintain wealth.
Hello, and welcome to the Wealth and Women podcast from the Personal Finance Society. I'm Emma Hall, and today we're exploring financial literacy amongst women. Research shows that women are less likely than men to take financial risks. They invest more cautiously, feel less confident making financial decisions, and aren't as likely to negotiate higher salaries. What's striking is this gap exists even when women have similar knowledge, experience, and income as men. So what's driving it? This podcast is about breaking that pattern, giving you the insight, tools and confidence to take control and make bold decisions with your money. And to help, I'm joined today by my brilliant colleagues, Alina Burlicue, Hazel Bowen and Tracy Brooks. Welcome, ladies. So my natural instinct around this is to go and dig into why this is occurring. Why are women, less confident with taking financial risk? Where does it stem from? That's the way my brain works. I always want to go right as far back as I can. And I did a lot of research to see if it was anything from childhood. Is it something that's occurring when we're young? And I was absolutely amazed by the level of research that I found showing that actually it is almost a social conditioning that's happening. Doesn't seem to be a surprise to you guys.
Nope.
All sorts of research going back from the 70s and 80s, where the way mothers and fathers were behaving around their children in situations like the playground, risk taking, the mums and dads would quite often sort of intervene more quickly with the girls. They didn't feel as comfortable taking risks or letting their daughters take risk, whereas with the boys, it was more encouraged. There's a really well-known study, it was done in 2000, where there's a bridge and mums are asked to put their toddlers on that bridge and sort of anticipate how steep they'll be able to cope with. And the mums in most of the cases in that study would overestimate what the boys could do in terms of the steepness and underestimate what the girls could do. And when they actually let the toddlers go down it, they were both as capable as each other. So it seems like we're, as women and as girls, being conditioned not to take risk, and maybe that's sort of then bleeding into the rest of our lives. Yeah. Have any of you had experiences with this? What are your thoughts on it?
I've not got personal experience of it, but I watched a TED talk about this concept and how it carries you into adulthood. And it was about how a lady who ran a coding course was teaching people, men and women, to code. And she would go around the room after looking at, after people had spent time developing a code. And a lot of the boys would have some code there and there'd be mistakes. And a lot of the girls would have no code. It was apparent and it came to light that the girls had done a lot of coding, but they deleted it because it wasn't perfect. And it's that idea that girls are expected to not take risks, and whatever they do it perfectly, whereas boys are expected to take risks and fail, and that is part of the process. Mm-hmm. And I think that feeds into the idea that, as you get older, you don't want to take a financial risk and fail and have done it badly, whereas a man might feel more comfortable taking a financial risk, and if it doesn't go well, learning from that and carrying on.
Yeah, it boils down to the confidence, isn't it? Because you only get confidence if you actually give it a go, and that's where you learn and where you grow. And then if you're pulling yourself away from going, right, then I'm going to take that leap, I'm going to give that effort, then you're not learning, you're not growing, and you're just lacking that confidence overall.
I mean, there's a lot of modeling. If I look at my older clients, I think there's a modeling around seeing their mums or grandmothers being less involved in the decision making. So having that example in the household, or the lack of, kind of shaped that attitude. For a lot of women, at some point, they have to learn about investing, and they have to learn about financial planning at certain point in life, which is sometimes is much later in life. And it's usually around milestones that are really high in emotion first. So when they go through divorce or bereavement or illness from a partner that usually drives, the most cash flow. That's when they have to get involved, and it's a steep learning curve. And the usual attitude is to pull back, to kind of, stay away from it because it's uncomfortable. So they don't get as involved. But if you look at the margins women tend to work with, they have low margins, don't they? Because you have the gender pay gap. I look at my younger clients. They don't seem to feel like they can afford to invest or, take risks because the margins are so low. They earn a lot less. So they feel like, okay, if I can just save, how am I going to invest? If I go paycheck to paycheck, how am I going to take risks with this money? I can't really afford it. To a certain degree, if I see two people, a man and a woman, early in the journey with the same revenue, they tend to have similar attitudes because, the more you earn, the more you feel like you can play a little bit more. But what I've noticed that as soon as the family grew, as soon as these women became mothers, naturally they fell back into like the more conservative stance, because you need to take time off for maternity. You need to compromise in terms of your career journey. And so a lot of women shifted into that, seeing themselves more like liability rather than an asset. And so with that, obviously you start being more conservative and being more focused on security and stability rather than flexibility. And usually taking risks is to do with more options, more, play, take risks and then hopefully looking for a reward.
And do you
later.
find that, like when you were saying about women generally want to be perfect before going, right, then I'm going to go for it. It applies to when we're sitting down with a client and kind of giving them a recommendation. If they're not 100% convinced, they're more likely to go, no, I'm not going to go for it, and more likely to keep the money in cash. Maybe a man will go, well, I understand 70% of what you're saying. I'm going to go for it. And because that woman has delayed investing and just holding the money in cash, then financially, in the long term, they're going to be worse off. So it's kind of giving that woman that confidence to go, don't look for that perfection, because what is perfection? It's giving them that encouragement to kind of go, take that leap, take that risk.
There is research that shows that women do take longer to make those decisions. And it is for that reason, because they want to gather information from more sources, verify it with friends and things like that before they go ahead, to give them that confidence.
Yeah, I see that trait in myself a lot. And, Tracy, you'll know this. When I first joined the firm and our boss couldn't quite understand, you said, didn't you, she's going to want to know all the detail. But when she makes a decision, she'll make it, and that'll be that. And I do see that in clients as well, very thorough. Female clients like to know all the bits and pieces. But Alina, like you're saying, if you have lots of responsibilities, in the research I was reading, the women are very risk aware, not necessarily risk averse a lot of the time. It's more of an awareness and feeling confident that they have all of the information to be able to make that informed decision. And talking about, confidence again, there was other research about women applying for jobs. They would pretty much most of the time have to have ticked all the boxes on what the, what you needed to apply for that job. Whereas a lot of men, would only have half of those boxes ticked and would go for it. So there is definitely seems to be a pattern there.
I feel very passionately about this topic. I agree with the fact, that, it is a fact that women do not apply and not put themselves forward unless they know they are more than capable. But I think there's also, in all of these things, it's how harshly we're judged. So, if we make a mistake, for example, at work, I'm very thorough. I'm sure everyone here is very thorough, because if we make a mistake, there seems to be, it's seen through a more harsh lens. If a woman were to make a mistake investing her money and had a bad outcome, potentially she could be perceived as more irresponsible than if a man did that. And I think particularly with going for jobs, there is research that shows that men are promoted based on potential and women are promoted based on performance. So if you're going to go into an interview where you're going to have to evidence everything you've said you can do, you need to be able to evidence that you can do every part of that job.
Yeah.
And I think that really holds women back. And it's framed as a lack of confidence in women. But I actually think it's an absolute awareness of the challenge that they're up against and wanting to make sure that they are not putting themselves forward for something that they're never going to get and going through that process. So I definitely think it's very easy for society to say it's a women problem when actually it's a societal problem and a bias problem from the research.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree. I think the sense of consequence, when you have, again, I go back to margins. So when you have fine margins, obviously the decisions seem to have a bigger weight. You can't really afford to go wrong, especially when you don't have proof points. Because with the investments, things like investments, we say, past performance is not guaranteed the future performance. Well, if that's the language you use, when you throw in the word risk in an environment where risk is not tolerable as much as in other environments, in a man's world, risk is seen as being bold, as being courageous, as being a leader. Whereas for women, you wouldn't associate the word risk with their kind of, how the performance is measured. And I think from a language point of view, if we were to assume that language shapes mindset, then what sort of mindset are you expecting when this language seems to trigger emotional responses that are maybe not conducive to long-term financial planning? But I agree, Emma, when I see with my clients, for example, as soon as they take that leap of faith, as soon as everything falls into place, they have this aha moment. They realize actually there is an opportunity. That sort of the sense of gain is superior to the sense of pain, and they commit to it, they're more likely to stay committed. And actually, I think statistics are showing that women and men do perform equally when it comes to investments. If anything, I think a lot of women perform better with their portfolios because they stay invested and less likely to go wild on, chasing wild sources of returns.
You're right. There is research that shows that they don't change their investments as often and they diversify more.
Absolutely. So I think what is perceived to be a vulnerability in terms of the lack of confidence can turn into a very robust long-term source of stability and a long-term strategy to create and maintain wealth.
Yeah. It's just getting people over that first hurdle, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you touched on a really good point about language, because there's also research that shows that in financial services, the language that's used is very masculine. And obviously this is based on gender stereotypes and biases, but, to build a portfolio, building, construction. We were talking earlier about, before the podcast, about children's role models, and you get Bob the Builder, for example. So if the language you're using is very masculine and it's about growing wealth, perhaps we as a profession need to start thinking about changing and incorporating other language. So reframing rather than growing wealth, creating security, creating freedom, creating lifestyle, things that are perhaps much more tangible and resonate more with women. So that it actually gets them to taking advice and doesn't seem like this abstract thing. Why do I need wealth? What I need is safety.
Yeah.
And that's a very good point, because I've noticed the shift happened when we moved from suddenly when we were transitioning from the traditional way of planning to goals-based planning. Do you remember back in 2010 when we shifted?
Yeah,
right?
It's all about performance, and
the conversation started changing, and all of a sudden now we're in 0.3 version where we talk about value-based planning. When we started shifting the language from goals to values, more women started paying attention because of those keywords that trigger really positive mindset in a woman wanting freedom, independence, empowerment, possibility, choice. And I think it went hand in hand with those conversations around menopause, later life, vulnerability, and more women felt like they were given permission to actually explore those areas with a sense of possibility rather than just being paralyzed by fear. And I've noticed more participation in those conversations. And ultimately, I think as soon as men started understanding that actually, if you give women the platform to become more empowered, to become more involved in decision making, their jobs are easier, because it's not all on them to provide, to plan, to worry, to take it all on. It's a partnership. I mean, because you look at relationships and you say it's a partnership, it's a kind of assumed situation, but it's not. I mean, if your behavior is not showing a true partnership, if it's very separated, delegated, very cut dry, then how do you expect someone to show up as a true partner when the times are tough, when you have to make decisions in terms of resetting your budget and resetting your savings and investments and so on, to then support longer lifetime, more years in retirement, creating a safer environment for kids who aren't able to afford buying themselves a property. Like those like key decisions where you need two people most times to just pull together.
Do you find that in meetings and you've got when you're dealing with a couple that sometimes only one of them will turn up to the meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
And would you say it's more often it's the man?
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you do in that situation?
Well, I try and ask before the meeting, is your partner, wife going to be with us? And if they say no before the meeting, I will usually say that's absolutely fine, but it's very helpful to have her involved at some point. The reasons being are, X, Y, and Z. So we're talking about your lifestyle. We're talking about how your money's going to help you facilitate the life you want to lead. And your wife is obviously going to have some important goals and opinions around your life. So it's really important that we get the context and the perspective of both of you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sometimes they still say no.
Yeah.
And then I think you just re-educate at every meeting.
Yeah, I'll sometimes say, do you mind if I just give her an initial call just so I can introduce myself? And then you get the opportunity then to sort of explain what you've just explained with the lifestyle factors and things like that, bringing it to life, not just talking about we're going to make you X% a year and it's all masculine type language. So how do we include women in meetings? What can we actively do? I mean, we've talked about maybe asking the man, if it is the man who's saying, no, it's okay, I'll look after everything. I think it's good to phone the client if you can, just to have an initial conversation and introduce yourself. Even if it goes no further than that, then at least they've met you and they know who you are to a certain extent. Is there anything else you think we could be doing?
Yeah, I tend to request the email address for both the husband and the wife. So when I send the report over to them, I send it to both emails and I get confirmation from both clients that they've read and understood it and whether they have any questions that they want to ask. And what I try and do as well is, if you're going to invest for a husband and wife, then they both need to complete a risk questionnaire independently of one another. So I tend to send it separately as well. And I'll say, look, it's okay if the conclusion is that you've got different risk levels, it's quite the norm. Don't feel that one of you has to fill it in and it has to be the exact same answers. And just explaining what it all means and explaining the journey, because it's so important that the woman is involved in the meeting, because statistics show that women outlive men. And I've got clients whereby it's only been the man that dealt with the finances, and when that husband's then passed away, that woman, yes, it's horrendous, her husband's passed away, but financially she's in a vulnerable position and she doesn't even know what on earth is going on. So it's so important that we get them engaged as soon as.
This is why I make a point of having the what ifs, if questions, or what if conversations rather, earlier on, because I don't think they understand that actually just because you're making the decisions now doesn't mean that it will always be the case. And actually, when you talk about, capacity and getting people involved in decision making, they go, oh, actually, I don't know how my wife would find stuff and how my wife would access this, and if they have any idea why we did what we did. And also sort of painting the picture, because when I ask, so is there any reason why we're not having a conversation with your wife? They may say, oh, she's never understood, or, she has a different way. The amount of times I get, or she has different philosophies around how we spend money and how we save money and how we invest money. And when I ask, well, walk me through it, then they're like, how about if she explains? Because we end up having a conversation at home that is not always, there's no problem, this is what I'm here for. And they're more likely to bring their wives to say, you explain to her why we're doing this. I was like, that's perfect. That's a conversation that had to happen, and it benefits you both. And actually, when they understand that, by getting her involved, the weight lessens and the pressure lessens. And who doesn't want a more comfortable lifestyle, making less decisions, right? So I think the what if questions earlier on, and understanding the impact of the loss of capacity, life, health, income, has to happen in a way that they understand the importance of that partnership.
Yeah,
absolutely. And this is where cash flowing has, I think it's definitely transformed the way advisors now work, and it has definitely helped open that conversation, that goal setting. Because many times when I'm going through the cash flow and I'll go, you might hit mid-70s, maybe expenditure might fall down, and you can see them, I can see, I've thought about that, or that's happened to my mother, and you can see that they're, so you're building that picture with them, and then they, I've thought about that, or maybe the woman's kind of going, nodding more than the man because she's already thought about that, but not the man so much.
Brings it to life, doesn't it?
Brings it to life.
Yeah,
and
makes it real.
And it's breaking it down as well, breaking it in steps, especially if the woman's looking for that perfection.
Yeah.
Okay, the cash flow kind of brings that perfection into it a bit, because you're kind of going, this is your income, this is a breakdown of expenditure, you're breaking it down and bringing them on that journey with you.
Yeah, it feels more fun, I think
rather
than
so,
just sitting in a meeting where it's all quite formal and you're talking numbers and figures, and actually bringing it to life. It's visual, it's colourful. You can run through these.
They can take ownership, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And quite often I've had like husbands and wives where maybe, stereotypically the wife wants to spend more on certain things, okay, well let's model that, and then the husband's like, whoa, like, hang on a minute, there's loads of red on the cash flow, and you can have a laugh about it, but it's reality. The personalities start coming out with different perspectives on things and different wants and needs, and I sit and think, have they talked about this actually together? Is this what they thought the other one wanted? And sometimes it can give women more confidence to actually saying, well, no, actually I was thinking about doing this, and how does that work, and is that possible? And it can give a bit of a peace of mind, I think, when you've run it through the cash flow, you've run these scenarios, somebody professional like yourself is in the room to not mediate, but be like, well, actually this is okay, this isn't so bad. It doesn't matter if she spends a bit more, it doesn't matter if he goes and plays golf and has that golf membership or buys the boat or whatever it is. It can actually, I think, gel the financial relationships with people. What I was thinking was, though, how do we get around us having to ask the women to be involved? How do we get more women to be like, actually, I want to be involved in that. Like, this is important. And I know, we've talked about being young and the way we're conditioned, but is there something we could be doing between, when you're very young to get into working life to make more women want to be like, well, no, actually, I know you want to do it, or it's your job, but I want to be involved as well. How do we go about that and increasing that more?
I've noticed education. I am more present in the workplaces. And so a lot more women come forward in terms of, after webinars and sessions, like group sessions, they're more likely to want to know, what does that actually look in my situation? Now, I've noticed a lot more single women lately who are wealth creators. So, a lot of women tend to be in a steady relationship a lot later in life, and so they're the masters of their own destiny. And so we have the privilege to open minds in terms of, okay, with that independence comes a lot of responsibility too. You have a lot of power, and you have a lot of responsibility then to sustain that independence by maybe taking the leap and consider investing or long-term planning. So, and also role modeling. So I have this amazing client, and I started working with her probably a couple of years back, and she was approaching 60s. Her husband wasn't working anymore. They were in a lot of debt. And when, after one of these webinars, the awareness creation webinars, she phoned me and she said, look, I have no idea where to start. I've never done this before. No one in my family knows how to do this. I need some guidance. So we started really kind of step by step like you do. And then 2 years later, she's investing. She's putting things together like pensions she wasn't using and all sorts of things, a lot more confident. But because she's so confident now, she's such a champion for women's empowerment with finances. And all of a sudden I have this group. She works in a company where I think it's a rarity nowadays, but they've worked with the same company for 30 years. So a lot of these women are like family. So all of a sudden I have this group of friends, and she's like, no, you have to talk to Alina. She's made such a difference in my life. You have to talk to her. And now I'm talking to this bunch of women who haven't ever considered talking about personal finance, talking about investing, really dipping their toe. And you can see they have different realities, different circumstances, different tolerance to that conversation. But we are pushing boundaries together. And they know, just because she did it, why couldn't I do it?
Yeah.
And I think that's a massive thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it's something that we don't typically do. So men will talk about money. You know, I know of men talking about money with their male friends, but women don't, I think, talk about money as much. Probably all of us in the room are excluded from that, because I talk to people about money probably more than is socially acceptable in the UK.
What's your earnings, Hazel? Tell me.
I do say that to my friends if we're having a conversation. I'm like, you don't have to tell me, but just answer this question and then I'll explain why. But I think if we can normalise having conversations about money, so that, you know, we're talking about that when we're at the pub, then actually it will just build confidence, and people will start having the confidence to go out and, you know, make their own investments. In fact, it's something that the PFS could maybe do as a campaign, as an educational campaign.
Absolutely.
Take that idea out of this room.
But I think also it's the culture that we're in, whereby it's not a nice look for women to be chasing for wealth and looking for progression. It's okay for a man, but not so for as a woman. So it's like very much like, well, how can we make that the norm? And like I say, it goes back to role models, and we were touching on before we started recording very much like what you had a classroom where these young kids, I think they were about 7 or 8 years old, they were asked to draw a picture of different occupations, or draw me a firefighter, draw me a pilot, all these really good well-paid jobs, and they all drew men. And what happened then, once they drew the pictures of these images of the firefighter was a man, a pilot, another man, they then brought in these 3 people in. One was a firefighter, one was a surgeon, and one was a pilot, and they were all women, and their faces like, oh. Wow. And then what message is that giving out to these kids? Well, it will shift them to go, actually, no, a woman can do this. So they need to see this more and more. Like women need, or these young girls need to see what is there. Normalizing it, and the boys as well. Absolutely.
Everyone needs to see the change in the stereotypes.
To be honest, I'm really selfish in this, because I'm a mother of 2 boys. Right? I don't want them to go through what we've seen men go, because my husband keeps telling me about, you know, the instance of, obviously he's more prone to reading all of these statistics about men's mental health. And I think over the years, with that awareness around men's mental health, we're seeing more and more where the pressures are. Well, I don't want them to feel the pressure. You know, we talk about equity. It has to be across the board. You know, earning, managing, growing wealth, sustaining wealth. It doesn't have to be one-sided.
There is a lot around that, isn't there? But, you know, Louis Theroux's just done The Manosphere.
Oh my gosh.
Netflix, which is hard viewing. It's, well, certainly was for me. You know, it's different for everyone. But for a lot of lads to be going towards that, there is something else going on, isn't there? Like you say, it has to be equal somehow. You can't flip it so it goes completely the opposite way. And it's difficult to get the balance. But it has to be there. Like you say, especially as a mum of 2 boys, you've got a son yourself, Tracy, you know, you don't want boys to be going down this avenue thinking that all women hate men, and, you know, that we want this and putting them down. And it's difficult to get the balance. We just want to feel equal, I suppose, have equal opportunities in certain respects, but without bashing men. It's
with
really
anything
difficult.
like this, when the pendulum swings, it always swings a bit too far in the other direction, and then it should hopefully settle in the middle.
Absolutely.
But I don't think you can make change happen unless you are bold enough to be really forthright with what you need to say. And it does present a challenge, definitely. And I think that the nuance of language is so important.
I think you're right. Language, definitely. And like you say, advocacy, mentoring.
You know, I was just going to touch on that as well. You know, very much like the workplace has a role in all this as well. It's just not
100%.
like, and it's I've had a situation early on in my career whereby there was an award that you could try and go for, and to be eligible for this award, you have to have been advising for less than 3 years. And out of the blue, the company I was working for said, this award is happening, and this is the criteria, and we're putting X, Y, and Z forward because they've performed the best. And they were all men. And I was kind of thinking, hold on, I've started the exact same time as them. And in fact, when you look at my performance, I've actually performed better. I was like, why haven't I been put forward? And I always remember you looking at me, Emma, saying, that should be you. And I was like, oh, do I ask? Oh no, I might be a bit too aggressive. I want to be liked. I should be thankful that I've got a job. I shouldn't be. And you were like, no, you should go for it. Anyway, I went up to the boss and I said, why haven't I been put forward? Me expecting some sort of response saying, oh, it's because of X, Y, and Z. The first thing that came out of his mouth, oh, it's not because you're a woman.
That's very telling.
And I was like, all right, okay. So that's what it was. Anyway, to cut the long story short, I won the award.
Good for you.
Of course you have.
But yeah, I won the award, and the amount of confidence that gave me was huge. And that then put my career on a different level. Then I was given those opportunities. I was, I was asked to do more, which meant more revenue for the company, meant more revenue for myself. But initially, I wasn't even thought about to be put forward. The good that I'd already done, what I'd achieved, more than those guys, hadn't been recognised. And in my eyes, I think it was purely because I was a woman. Without them realising, I think the company didn't realise what they had done.
Yeah.
So it's so important that women or people, there's a mentorship within the company. So there's a safe space where everyone can voice how they're feeling without being judged.
And sponsorship.
Yeah.
So sponsorship, the difference between mentoring, mentoring is to, just for anyone who doesn't know who's listening to the podcast, mentoring is about someone helping you develop, whereas sponsoring is about someone who can platform and champion you.
Yeah.
And I think for women in particular, it's again that tightrope that we walk, where you said about wanting to be liked.
Yeah.
I may have mentioned this in a previous series, but there was a study done at Harvard University where the same CV was put in front of two different groups of university students. One was called Howard, one was called Heidi. And the students were asked which one they liked and who they'd like to work for. And the one who had looked at Howard's CV thought he was clearly ambitious, successful, a great guy that definitely liked to work with him. Whereas the ones who looked at Heidi's said, well, she obviously was successful, but they weren't quite sure if they'd like to work with her. She seemed like she was out for herself. And this is exactly the same content on the CV. And so I think we really have a tight rope that we need to walk. And I think it's really important that that's acknowledged, because if businesses don't acknowledge that exists, they won't do anything about it.
Yeah.
And it's why women in particular need male sponsors who are prepared to say, actually, this woman is really good, because we are judged more harshly if we try and advocate for ourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
So in my mind, listening to you both, there are two things. One, ask for it.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you had the audacity to go into
I was
someone's
lucky.
office.
This is a
Well,
big
I was
one.
lucky, you see,
It's a big
because
one.
I would have gone in, but I gone in with a lot of hesitation. I was lucky that I've got female colleagues. I had Emma to go in, no, you should go for it. That.
Yeah, you do.
But
You need
what if I
support.
didn't have that? Would I have actually, I don't know whether I'd have knocked, would I have been brave enough? But I shouldn't have had to have asked in the first place. It should have been, we put you forward because well done, you're doing a good job.
Yeah.
Because none of those guys had to be brave.
No, they didn't have to do it. They didn't have to put themselves in an uncomfortable position. And I think this boils down to everything. It boils down to asking for a pay rise. It's expected that the man will ask for the pay rise, whereas the woman might go, maybe,
There's
should I be
good
just thankful that
statistic
I've got
about
a job? I might be a bit too bossy, or I might be unliked, not very.
Yeah.
This woman, she deserves it.
Just looking at the research, and it said that they studied a load of men and women, and 57% of men had negotiated on their first salary, and only 7% of women had negotiated it. It's just like, I think you're right. Women don't have the confidence because they're scared of rocking the boat. And again, I think that goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, where there are social norms we're expected to follow, or it's ingrained in us. Somebody commented a while back to me that when I was off work, they said, oh yeah, the boss really, really missed you, didn't realise how much work you did, but he told me not to tell you because he was worried you'd get a big head about it. It's like, I'm like, well, why? If I've done all right, you can tell me. I'm not, I was like, it's just having the confidence to rock the boat occasionally, asking for pay rises and not being scared to do it. And if they say no, they say no.
But there's so much gender bias in that as well, because you sent us a image, I think, on LinkedIn recently of
my gosh.
the billboard about the AI employee.
Yeah.
And wasn't the one for the woman saying she'll never go off sick, she'll never ask for a pay rise or something like
That's
that?
it, yeah.
Whereas what did the man's one
He's
say?
going to progress in life, he's going to be ambitious. And it's like, it was just, I'm hoping that was an AI generated thing.
I know, when I sent it to you, I was
hoping.
like, is this real? Is this actually real?
Yeah.
But they named a company who had done it, and it was in Bristol Airport apparently, but you never know.
And probably they never thought twice about it. They didn't realise the bias that they'd put in there.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to have women on the board of companies, to have diversification, not because, it's a tick box exercise. No, it's because there's different opinions that you need to consider. If you all got the same like-minded people in a room, it's very, very dangerous then. You're not embracing the whole...
You get groupthink.
Yeah, that's it. I was thinking it's not intentional, I don't think, in a lot of circumstances.
No.
It's just not something that's crossed people's minds because they haven't got a different perspective.
Yeah.
maybe.
I don't think diversity is a compromise. I think it's a great asset to have within an
Absolutely.
organization. And
Yeah.
I think, to your point, Hazel, you need that environment where people feel safe, but also to ask, but also to support, because you don't want to be perceived like the one rocking the boat. You want to be seen as the person who is looking to progress, to innovate, to put forward new ways of doing things. And with that, I think it's really alongside education and mentoring and sponsorship. I think dispelling the myths on a regular basis, giving people the power to chip away at these myths is so important.
Yeah.
Like, for those listening, I think we have a pretty cool episode in season 1 where we talk about dispelling myths and we talk about this association of maths skills and financial planning. And clearly not the thing, but a lot of women walk into coaching conversations, or I'm sure planning conversations, with this idea of, I'm so bad at maths, I can't really, I'm bad with money, therefore. So, and I make a point all the time to actually extracting those beliefs and extracting those myths out of their, minds and spotting them in their language and challenging those beliefs and see, gradually shifting perspective. And I think one of the biggest things, especially when you have it's within your power to shape the reality of a younger person, to say, actually, obviously, you're not doing much for your younger self at the moment, but how about the young person next to you?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you like them to have a better outlook? Because often it's about them creating wealth for the next generation. Well, if that's the case, if you want their decision making to be better, if you don't want them to be bad with money, especially if your offsprings or nephews or nieces or students or whatever coaches are women, wouldn't you like them to participate in that conversation with that sense of possibility rather than pull back by fear and that limitation?
Yeah, I think you're right. And even, again, with our children at the moment, especially at the girls that we've got, you've got 2 daughters, I've got a daughter, 7-year-old, taking risks, like in the playground now. I have to bite my tongue sometimes because she's off up this massive blooming thing that she might fall off. But I think, no, she's got to learn. And actually me sitting here going, don't do that and don't be careful. And I'm thinking, I'm replicating now what I'm reading about. So it's quite hard. But I think if we can just do little things like that with our daughters in particular, and actually, like you say, with the boys, observing it, that actually every boy, girl, whatever, you can all do it and all give it a go and not be scared of taking risks, then having the education that you were talking about, then having the advocacy and the mentoring and the workplace policies. And hopefully that'll give all the women out there, more confidence. And actually for the men, see it as the norm. It's becoming more of the norm for women to be more included and involved in these conversations without it being a negative thing.
Yeah. And I would absolutely pay attention to that, the negative side, because I think a lot of the times we look at the natural inclination, especially as women navigate various stages in life. We tend to see vulnerability as a weakness, as something that can hinder the financial planning process, and actually looking at the strengths in that. And sort of, I always encourage my clients to lean into each other when it comes to personal tendencies, when it comes to triggers, to kind of work with what they have to make the best of what they have. And I think one classic example is when you see couples preparing for retirement. I always make a point of encouraging those conversations of now what, because when they're empty nesters, especially women, don't know what to do with themselves. The kids are no longer here. What am I about? When you live a life building all these sense of identities as a mother, as a parent, as a spouse, as a friend, as a carer, what is left of you in that combo to actually think about retirement with that sense of excitement and motivation? And I see a lot of women, like the other day I was speaking with this couple, and she felt so out of place because she said, so all of a sudden because I'm in menopause, my kids are not here, I don't have any self-regulation, so her spending just went completely out of control. And he was like, I don't know what to do with her. Talk to her. And then actually when we started talking about the changes the changes in circumstances, but also the physiological changes and how the mind works and how, you know, you have your ebbs and flows. And she was like, yes, and yes, and yes. I recognize myself. Oh, yes. And he was like, wow, someone actually understands this woman. We've been fighting about this. And actually now they're working with each other. So she's like, you know, and when I was telling you about this energy thing that I feel like and he was like, yeah, well, that's exactly what but she didn't have the language. And I said, wouldn't it be amazing if you had that space where you can actually learn to put into words how you feel inside?
And you're linking very nicely to one of our other episodes there. Won't say more about that.
I was kind of thinking, Alina, stop.
So we've talked about lots of different things around how women can become more confident, how we can encourage it. So what top tips would we give to help women and also employers and, you know, colleagues increase people's or women's confidence?
So my top tips for people working with clients is to make it standard practice, as we've discussed, to get both people in the room.
Yeah.
And when they're there, ask the opinion of both parties, regardless of who's the strongest person in the room. I see it often where someone answers a question on someone's behalf and you need to actually pause and say, that's great, thank you, but can you just explain in your words what's important to you?
Yeah.
And the final thing is cash flow planning as an opportunity to engage women or a man, if that's the way to get them engaged, because it moves talking about the abstract investment growth into the practical, what's it going to achieve for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, don't be too scared to get it wrong.
Yeah, that's
I think women naturally hold back because they're kind of thinking, oh, what if I do get it wrong?
Yeah.
So what if you get it wrong?
Yeah. Don't be scared to fail.
Don't be scared to fail.
Yeah.
More often than not, you won't fail, but you're going to grow from that.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing, especially, you know, like I said earlier about women are reluctant to invest. They might hold the money in cash for a bit too long. They've missed the opportunity at that point. And I think it goes back to within a workplace, we need to have mentoring where there's a safe space for everyone to feel that they can say how they feel without being judged. Just to kind of a bit like a sounding board.
Yeah, we've implemented it at our place, haven't we? And it like when I talk to some of the mentees, you know, I say it's about you. It's not about how you're doing in the company, as in, you know, whether there's no targets in our place, but, you know, performance. It's more about actually you and your development and any concerns or anything else as an open, confidential space.
Yeah.
It's good, actually, really good.
On mentoring, something that I think is quite good with mentoring is to do it as two-way mentoring. So where the mentee is also the mentor and providing their input to challenges that their seniors have.
Yes.
And pairing people who don't necessarily, you know, pairing a woman and a man, for example, or people that don't necessarily do exactly the same roles, where they can provide insight from a different perspective.
Yeah, great.
I love
really
that.
Good. Yeah, really
I love
good.
that. For me, I think taking risks come from a place of trust. And I think as much as we can, if we could shape the trust when it comes to environment, when it comes to systems, when it comes to selves. So I think with trusting selves, I think education plays a huge role in giving women a sense of possibility, you know, through education, but also creating the systems for them to feel safe, to actually access strategies and tools in a way that suit them, not putting everyone in a shiny box, just allowing them to explore the value system and applying what they have, the strategies and tools, applying to their own circumstances. And actually then when you look at the environment as an all-encompassing thing, to create a culture where people feel safe to fail, to ask questions, to put themselves forward, to work collaboratively with someone without feeling like they're less of. Because you don't have to take it all on yourself to feel powerful. You can delegate, you can collaborate, you can engage other people to feel supported, especially when it comes to navigating life and change. Yeah, that is sustainable. And I think creating a sustainable source of results, I think, can only contribute to that sense of trust and that sense of empowerment of going after things without feeling like compromise, without feeling like you're judged or you're in that defensive mode where it's no longer within you, it's with other people to validate constantly what you do and how you feel and how you act.
Yeah. And I'd add to that, what you were talking about, Tracy, surround yourself with people who will support you and give you that oomph that you need sometimes. Me and Tracy are very accountable to each other. Like, we're very direct with each other. We'll be very honest, won't we, about things. But
you need it sometimes, don't you?
Yeah. We'll say it how it is, but we know each other well enough that
comes from a good place, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. And I don't think me and you would have progressed the way we have without having me and you and the other group of women that we have around us, where we back each other up all the time, don't we? We always, if we're having one of those moments where we're like, I don't know if, a little bit of a wobble, it's like, no, come on, you can do it. Tracy says, well, come on, Em, you can do this. It's all right. We'll get there. Usually when it's like exams or something along those lines, I'm like,
just reset it.
It'll be all right. What if you failed again? It could be anything, couldn't it? But surrounding yourself with the right people who've got your back and know you well enough to push you, and okay, what if he says no? It doesn't matter, And also, I think with clients and even like in the mentoring side, like, well, okay, what's the worst that can happen? What is the worst? Like, let's play it through. Is that as bad as you think it is? What if you don't go for it? Guaranteed, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to progress. So just having those sort of people around you, I think, would be good.
The what if questions absolutely essential to create that familiarity, because for a lot of women, they're probably, for a lot of women that I talk to anyway, they're probably the first generation of wealth creators. You don't know what you don't know, but having that ability to navigate the what if scenarios. And actually, going back to the language, I think language is key to know what triggers someone to be bolder or more defensive. You tell a woman the word risk, and that can create a lot of different reactions. Most of it is defensive, conservative. But you talk to her about a gradual process where the stepping stone to kind of go security, stability, then flexibility, and they go, now you're talking. It's not a huge leap from here to flexibility, meaning taking risks and taking a leap of faith. No, it's actually for you to be able to afford to go there, you need to put in place what you're good at.
Yeah.
Securing your base, stabilize, and then go bold. And then the conversation happens in a different way.
Yeah, and I think the final thing I'd add is potentially, employers putting in place like financial literacy courses or training as standard. And then that way, if the men and the women are doing it together, they're learning together, just the same as you might have a private medical insurance policy or a menopause policy or training, or just put the financial literacy in there as well. It's all right for us, we're in finance, but if you're not, that'd be quite useful, I think.
Yeah.
When you put, like, you see, we put a lot of resources now, thankfully, to talk about like things like menopause, but you put it in the mental health category more often than not. And we know how linked everything is. So if we were to develop that environment where you have the educational side, the financial well-being as a glue that kind of holds things together, it's not the missing link, it's the one of the links that are then used within the companies to actually create that balance for people. It's not just mental health, it's not just physical health, it's also financial health, to feel like a whole.
Well, that's all we've got time for. A huge thanks to Alina, Hazel and Tracy for joining me on the Wealth and Women podcast, and to you for listening. To find out more, you can find useful links in the show notes. You can also explore related articles and more podcast episodes on the Personal Finance Professional website, many of which can be recorded as CPD and logged directly on the site with a click. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. Until next time, goodbye.